Welcome, Yamhill County, to Speaking Frankly. I'm your host, Howie Harkema, and our tagline is, "And how we doin'?" My guest today is Ramsey McPhillips, who is part of a coalition, Stop the Dump, and many other groups, sort of independent from that, but at the same time has been very involved. Ramsey, welcome to Speaking Frankly.
Thank you.
It's good to have you on again. First, I'm going to read a statement. I want to congratulate you and the Stop the Dump Coalition effort when recently McMinnville City Council voted unanimously to direct hauler Recology to divert city waste from Riverbend Landfill. Recology has proposed sending garbage from the city's residents and businesses to headquarters landfill in Washington State, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So how many years, Ramsey, have you been working on this effort?
23.
My goodness.
Right.
So give us a short background history on, yeah, I know, you could go forever, I know. On not only Stop the Dump Coalition, but the efforts that were started even before you.
Right. Well, Yamhill County ran out of garbage space in their landfill called Whitesin,
Yes.
which is over on Riverbend Road. And the county went in the process of trying to find a place to put it, and they decided to put it next to my farm off of Highway 18 on the Bernard Farm along the river, the South Yamhill River. And at that time, it was thought to be just a stopgap effort, a small local landfill, while they figured out what to do as Yamhill County grew for a larger facility. And it was actually just leased by the local company, which was City Center Garbage, owned by Ezra and Fred Cook, who knew the Bernards. And sort of to spin this forward quickly, one thing grew bigger and sales happened, that the Cook sold out to a larger corporation, and that corporation went belly up, and another corporation bought it, and eventually Waste Management got hold of it, and it went from a little tiny local landfill to a regional landfill, and they applied in the early 90s then to make it into the behemoth that it is today. So previous to that, my family was fighting it tangentially just to sort of keep it in bounds and to close it so that it would, not impact the river or the water and the farmland and the tourist industry. And then they kept winning through these land use procedures to get it to the place that it is now. So we've had two initiatives. One we won back in the 90s, which was supposedly to have stopped it, but that was curtailed in the courts. We had a second initiative, which is when I sort of showed up a second time, reared my head, which I led with Lee Freeze, and we lost that one handily. And so that forced me then into the land use courts. And that process has been about 9 years.
Wow. Isn't it funny how temporary things can become forever things?
Yeah, it's like that old 50s commercial where the vacuum cleaner salesman shows up at the door and a housewife opens it and he throws a bunch of dirt on her floor and she doesn't know what to do and her husband isn't there and she's really worried and he happens to have a super duper vacuum cleaner right there that's only $9.99 and she quickly buys it and he slams the door and runs with his money and it breaks the next day. And she's stuck with both a dirty floor and a horrible
we've been
vacuum
stuck with this for quite a while, and it's a stink mountain out there.
Yeah, it's just getting worse and worse. There is a nuisance study happening. It's only the third time in the state of Oregon that they have commenced an actual official state-mandated odor and nuisance study, and that's about to preclude this month.
Awesome. So is Stop the Dump Coalition, are you a nonprofit?
It's a 501c4, so we're a benevolent corporation. We have to spend all the money that we make. We can't, we're not making a profit, but it's not tax deductible.
Right. So with Stop the Dump Coalition, I know you're independent from that, but there was another name originally.
Well, when we lost the initiative, a group of people, mostly people close to the landfill, who were greatly affected by the idea of this expansion, got together and formed Waste Not.
Yes.
And that was made up of, about 5 or 6 people who actually formed the 501c4. But then as the group grew, it became a coalition. And so joining us were other organizations, individuals, wineries, lawyers, et cetera. So we formed Stop the Dump Coalition.
That's fantastic. So how were you funded through that process?
So we had fundraisers, basically, and would solicit donations from stakeholders and from people who were just aggrieved by the environmental atrocity,
Yes.
which it is. So we've had everything from pink martini. I started with a little pink martini.
I remember.
Yeah,
out
in
of
my
your house.
barn with
Yeah.
90 people came, and then a bigger one, and then we had this huge one up at Youngberg Hill with the Von Trapp kids, et cetera, and then we've had some funding, and then a very terrible, weird thing happened. We felt we were winning in the courts, and over some technical stuff, our attorney forgot to file, and the whole thing was reversed. So unfortunately, we were forced to go after our own attorney, who was a very reputable, he just made a mistake.
Yeah.
And we received a sizable judgment,
Okay.
which allowed us to claw back his mistake. It didn't give us money, we
Right.
were really put back on our heels at that moment. So that chunk of money really is what's funded us up to this point, but we've run out, frankly. We're in the Supreme Court,
Right.
Oregon Supreme Court, which is costly. And so we've been out with palms up, and people have been extremely generous because they understand the ramifications of it expanding for the local economy.
Right. And what kind of money are we talking here overall, do you
We're
think?
over $500,000 that
Yeah.
we've raised.
Yeah. So what is the new location that our waste and garbage will now go to?
So it is going to headquarters landfill, which is up in Cowlitz County, which is off of I-5 in Washington, just north of Vancouver.
Yes.
It's an old Weyerhaeuser landfill that was closed. It's 300 and something acres. It's regulated just as any good big landfill.
Right.
The difference between it and Riverbend, of course, is that there's no farmland or close neighbors, and it's right on a main arterial. Trucks are not having to weave through
Sure.
farmland and come from here and gone. And it has 100 years of capacity, where, of course, Riverbend now has 2 years, although we're even fighting to claw
Even the
back.
2 years,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. So those are the big differences. The other thing is it's municipally owned.
Okay.
Cowlitz County bought it from Weyerhaeuser, knowing that there's money in their garbage hills.
Right.
And that they would be able to control their own garbage rates and the environment if they owned it themselves. So that's why it's so much cheaper than any other landfill in Oregon, and why the city of McMinnville has made a brilliant choice to get our trucks in there, lock in these low rates, because garbage contracts go for long periods of time.
Right.
It's not year to year.
Right.
So
Like
they're
it
locking-
could be a 10-year contract.
Could be a 10-year contract. So they're locking in on the benefit of McMinnville,
Right.
even though it's 10% more over the arc of 10 years, with landfill space closing in, in the valley. They've made a brilliant economic move, and they've really structured it so that the stability of our garbage rates will be foregone for 10 years.
Well, even with the expansion possibly occurring, our rates could have gone up by that 10% anyway.
They probably will. Once they get what they want, then they have control, because they are a monopoly.
Right.
And then they set the rates, basically, because the contract with the county is now just sort of rolling.
Right.
Because there is no capacity, and who knows what's going to happen.
And there's been no capacity for a while.
Right, right.
So, so would you talk about what this not only means to the McPhillips 100-year century farm, but also the farms in your area and to the local community?
It's really a matter of trust. We were given a bill of sale about this facility, that it was going to be for the common local good. And then it became this huge regional facility that facilitated the importation of garbage from all over. And so, as we've complained about the issues relating personally, the smells, the seagulls,
The
water
leachate, all of it.
contamination, right? Just the litter that I'm having to pick up constantly. It just has been our voice that we're like, well, you told us it would never get this big. You told us it would never become this issue. You told us this and that. So we're just simply asking you to roll it back, if not get rid of it, to what it is that you initially promised. The local people who were asked to come and give their opinion and given promises in the original land use procedure. And so we feel really that we have validity in our complaints, and we also, at this point, feel that we have some vindication, given the way that things are going with its expansion.
Yes. So, talk about how many bags that you pick up off of your farm.
So, you know, my farm is just downwind.
I know.
Right, and so I'm legally the farm of standing. So when we have these legal cases, it's usually McPhillips Farm that is in the legal, you know, nomenclature.
Sure,
right?
sure.
McPhillips Farm versus
Yes.
Yamaha County Air Waste Management. So the landfill, you know, it at its biggest point had 500,000 tons of garbage coming in, and it's a mountain, and it's windy, and it would just blow across. Their thing is right to my trees and my stream. The stream was just packed with, you know, plastic bags you could put a drill through and just pick it up and get a core sample. It's just all plastic right in the salmon tributary.
That's
insane. And so they've tried very hard. They put up a, you know, like one of those big like golf fences where people are driving range fences to try to inhibit the trash from coming over to my property, but it really hasn't worked. For one reason is because it's in a floodplain, and they have not put a fence on the river edge. So the garbage just goes into the bottomland. Then the water rises up, picks up all these plastic bags, essentially, other trash. I mean, I found, you know, IV bags. I mean, it's just crazy, whatever. Tons of diapers, crazy, horrible things. Picks up, goes downriver, and then as the water recedes, drops it on my farm and other farms.
Yes.
Mindful that this is irrigatable land. This is the river that we're drawing water from. I have 7 drinking wells on my property. You know, historically, my family's had the farm for 155 years.
Right.
So you multiply that by the number of farms around it that have not been bought up by Waste Management, and you understand why we are so aggrieved by this and how it affects us. So weekly, I employ people to go and pick up plastic bags across my farm, because if I don't, then the rain mats it down, it starts to disintegrate into its little miniature particulate, and then I'm basically farming plastic. Exactly.
Talk about the animal life for a moment out there as well.
Well, there's one benefit to Riverbend Landfill for McPhillips Farm, and that is it's a wildlife buffet.
Yes.
So there's 2 good reasons for that. I have the most incredible wildlife out there feeding off that landfill. The raptors and the eagles and the, you know, the hawks and the bobcats and everything. Also, you know, I have 200 sheep, and I'm right now. I just had my 2 first lambs of the season.
Oh,
really
congratulations!
Yeah. A little boy, a little girl, really cute. The coyotes sort of look at them and like, I don't know. I'd rather go have the leftovers from Blue Hour from downtown Portland, you know. They just walk past my lambs and go gorge themselves on Riverbend Landfill, come home and sleep under my blackberries and burp, you know, and don't need to necessarily attack my livestock. Although I've had a couple hits on my goats recently, so I'm getting a Great Pyrenees dog. But the nuisance animals, of course, are the seagulls and the starlings. And now, of course, they've hired this gentleman to have a raptor program where it chases, has a hawk, peregrine falcons. Well, now the peregrine falcon has found my poultry. So their falcon with a little bell comes over and attacks my poultry.
Right.
So, you know.
What's the benefit?
Yeah, and it has not inhibited the number of birds to the landfill in my count. Right now, today, there's 1,000 seagulls gulping up, you know, my grass seed.
I'm really sorry to hear that. How high is that mountain now?
It's 265 feet above sea level, and so above Riverbend Landfill, I think, I mean above the highway.
Yeah.
You know, it's built into the, it's 14 feet into the floodplain, into the water table, and then it's in the floodplain. But at Highway 18, I think it's 165 feet. Yeah. You know, it was going to go 100 feet more. We've been successful. The first round of legal victories we had was to lower it 100 feet. Can you imagine that thing 100 feet more?
Well, you can already see it from 18 by the time you're at Lowe's.
Right.
So
that was our first victory, and then, you know, that was going to be 100 acres, and then they wanted it to be 30-something acres, and now we've got it down to 29 acres, and we're hoping to nix them for the end, 0 acres.
So what do you see as the benefit for the local community at large?
Of closing the landfill?
Yes.
Well, as McMinnville has proven, cost. You know, I can speak all day long about my problems having to do with nuisance and McPhillips Farm's, you know, capital baseline. But you have to look at the big picture. And indeed, the county did look at what is called need. Is there a need for Riverbend landfill? When they authorized the expansion from the beginning of this legal argument, they hired a consulting firm for $42,000 to come in and see if Riverbend landfill were to disappear, what would be the cost in Yamhill County? And the assessment was that we were going to have to build a $6 million transfer station, and that the cost of transporting the garbage to Hillingon was going to be so prohibitive that the actual increase of garbage for Yamhill County would go up. In letters, they said 250%, but this study basically said, depending on which landfill in Oregon you sent it to, it would be anything from 25% up to 100 and something percent.
Oh, goodness.
We countered that and said, that's outrageously wrong. Why don't you actually ask the landfills how much they would charge you?
Yes.
Because this is a study. This is an
Right.
academic study.
Sure.
So just go to the actual, they couldn't, because that would be seen as poaching Waste Management's territory.
I see.
And it would have you this inner fight between corporations. So what happened with McMinnville? They actually got a real-time quote.
Oh,
And
really?
what was it? 10%. A real-time quote for the transfer station. The transfer station cost $1.5 million,
Instead
not
of
$6 million. So when you ask the question, what will happen to Riverbend landfill, or to Yamhill County when Riverbend landfill closes? Not much in terms of the economy. It's actually not even 10% because they, for the first year, have decided to forego the CPI, which is that annual increase based on,
Right.
market forces. So actually next year, garbage rates are only going to go up 5%, which is what they were going to go up anyway
Right.
because the CPI was
Sure.
5%. So Recology's been very gracious in this transition that the city of McMinnville has asked for.
And even that increase is just for the hauling, right?
Oh yeah, I mean the transfer station is incrementally charged into our garbage bills because they're business and they're not just going to
Right.
build us a free transfer station, and that's why the prices before were so high. $6 million.
Right.
It wasn't $6 million, and we knew that. We were constantly going in front of the commissioners and saying that your numbers are askew and that you need to do a better process.
Yeah.
In fact, the study was done by, surprise, surprise, Waste Management's ex-tax accountant. So, you kind of wonder what kind of analysis they're going to get.
Exactly. Yeah. So have you received much community pushback over this effort?
So I started this along with many people and found myself to be person non grata in terms of a certain sector of the county, and that was the business community. Because the business community counted on stable, cheap garbage rates.
Sure.
Totally understandable.
Commercial rates.
And so many of them felt that I may have legitimate complaints, but that I needed to be sacrificed. The McPhillips farm should be destroyed in order for the common good of the garbage rates, which is why I fought tooth and nail to counter the studies that were saying that that was, in fact, legitimate. It was not legitimate, and the city of McMinnville just proved it. This is the vindication that I'm talking about. So since this vindication has happened, I'm getting a lot of slaps in the back of the grocery store from people who I never dreamt in a million years would side with our side, saying, okay, you were right. It's not, henny penny's not going to, the sky is not going to fall.
Yeah.
There is no, it's basically the landfill is obsolete. What is it now? McMinnville left, Portland Metro left, the tipping fees, SP's newsprint, who was over 100,000 tons, that was a quarter to a fifth of landfill. Shut down. So what is Riverbend's function? If it's no longer costing us a lot of money, and it's no longer providing fill for half the county or its major business,
What is the need?
right.
Interesting. So what are your hopes for the future at the Riverbend site as things progress?
My family has had the farm for 155 years, and I am one of the last of the Mohican McPhillips. There aren't many of us around, and so I'm not quite sure what's going to happen to my very beautiful land. It's horribly impacted by the landfill currently, but I'm hoping that it will close and I can spend the remainder of my life rehabilitating the environment and the water and everything. So if you look at a map, you see 700 acres of Waste Management's land.
Right.
You see 500 acres of McPhillips land.
Right.
I just bought all the way to the golf course, all the bottom land, and then you have the golf course, and then you have Highway 18, and then a couple farms in Linfield College. Seems to me that that's an awfully beautiful patch of river. I own 5 miles of river on both sides.
That's fantastic.
So theoretically, if everyone to play their cards right and fate happens correctly, that could be a real asset to the county, if not the city, is something, the Heritage Museum is already out there.
Right.
Right. So it's not appropriate, I don't believe, to put houses out there, and the nuisance is going to linger for decades.
Oh, yeah.
There's all sorts of toxins buried in that hill.
Yeah.
But as a terms, as eventually as a recreational place,
Yeah.
it could be quite magnificent. I have a fantasy, Howie, that we call it, change the name. I don't want to live next to Riverbend Landfill the rest of my life if it closes.
Right.
But maybe it should be completely covered with milkweed and call it Monarch Mountain, and be, Waste Management can do a great PR stunt and turn it into a production for the decreasing monarch populations.
So that brings me to a question that needs to be asked. Does this community need to seek Superfund cleanup of the stink mountain that's out there?
No. One of the great things about Oregon's land use policy is that because of some problems previously, primarily the big Portland landfill that was out at St. John's, which was caught off guard, leaking and not having correct funding for the inevitable.
Right.
They have asked that all tons going into landfills in Oregon have a tax, and it goes to an orphan landfill fund.
Okay.
And that fund is generic, so that if ever there's a landfill in Oregon that has a problem, and the business who has put up bonds and guarantees flounders, then the state will step in and mitigate. Also, there are several trust funds. The county has a trust fund, Waste Management has a trust fund. So it's one of the things I feel good about, that if there is, I don't think there's enough money if there's an earthquake, because all that earthquake money is going to go to things before people worry about Riverbend landfill.
Yeah.
But the citizens shouldn't really worry too much should there be a necessity to mitigate major problems. The issue of getting them to spend the money and do it probably would be another fight, but there's money.
Good. So I'm going to ask for you to just go ahead for the next 5 minutes or so and give your final thoughts and synopsis over all that you've been through with this effort.
Well, it's not over.
I know.
So presently, the Waste Management has been buying time because the landfill got full. They expected 9 years ago to have a cakewalk. I was kind of a goofy guy in a rusted truck with, the Columbo dirty trench coat.
And the silly hat.
And the silly hat, right, smelling of goat poop. And I don't think they thought that I would be as aggressive and as tenacious, or that a group would form who's been so organized and so diligent, with lawyers and wineries and, really erudite people. They really should be congratulated. I may be considered a little unhinged, but they are tremendous people, and I wouldn't exist without them. They really have done the hard work. But right now, we're sitting at the precipice of Waste Management teetering. As I've said, it's obsolete, but they still are trying and trying and trying to buy this extra space. So Metro Portland has pulled out, and Waste Management asked them to pull out because they needed time. There was no place to put the garbage. They needed to save space for Gamble County. Now McMinnville's pulled out, so there's no longer needing the space for this section of the county. Right. So there was a recent lawsuit with a local judge who we thought we had a really good case in front of, which simply is that they should not be given this extra 2 years of time until the bigger picture, which is in front of the Supreme Court, is decided. Because the issue in front of the Supreme Court is whether or not it affects my farm, the farm of standing. And so you should wait to find out if the higher courts decide that you should continue to destroy the adjoining agriculture. The local judge decided against us. We were thrown back on our heels. There was a very clear statutory case called Columbia Riverkeepers versus Clackamas County, I think it is. Which simply said, when a landfill or whatever asks for a new zoning, which this one did, all the laws percolate up to the new zoning. And the new zoning is that you're going to have to deal with Ramsey McPhillips in the Supreme Court. The judge here in the county said, no, no, no. They get to go back to the original permit in the 80s, which totally doesn't make sense. I mean,
How does that work?
It doesn't. And so we were, but what it did is it allowed the landfill to start filling in 2 years more of garbage. And DEQ can't stop them because the county, they only listen to what the county says. The county wanted their tipping fees, so that's why they did it.
Right.
Waste Management wanted the money and wanted to buy time to keep fighting this in court. And this judge, who's otherwise a wonderful person in the community, either misunderstood the ruling or something is up, because the questionable part about his ruling is he ruled from the bench. He didn't take it under advisement after the oral testimony, and then he never gave his opinion. We waited and waited and waited for him to explain his ruling, and he never did it. So our attorney had to write his opinion against ourselves,
Right.
to file it in order to begin the process of appealing and staying his judgment.
Well, that's ridiculous.
And legal, apparently.
Wow.
So one wonders, in a small municipal court such as this, it really is curious that someone would do something so obviously aggressive towards one of the parties, aggrieved parties.
Yeah.
It wasn't that he was on vacation or they didn't have time. It was a statement, and we don't understand the statement because it's clear. The case law, anyone you talk to, says that's the way the state has to work. It's like saying with this new school bond, when they put in all of this new, in all of our new schools,
Yes.
they're going to change out the emergency exits, the signage and everything. It's going to have to stay on during an earthquake or if there's no electricity. Well, what this judge said was, no, the old zoning's fine. You just go ahead and build your new school with your new bond, and you just leave those old exit signs on there, and they'll turn off, when the electricity goes up, because that was the zoning in place when you put them in the building. That's not how it works. Everything, in order for society to mature and to advance, and for codes and law to be regulated, it has to percolate, as I said, up to the current standard and law.
Right.
They asked for the zone change. We didn't. We were trying to stop it. And when they got that zoning, they have to adhere to all the laws. What this judge has said is they get to cherry pick. They can choose this one because it's advantageous to them. But if they want to screw Ramsey and his farm, they can go back to 1981 where it said that they didn't need to worry about Ramsey's.
Well, if I was going to upgrade a home, I would have to meet the latest standards and codes and all of that.
Makes sense, doesn't it?
Right.
And that is the way that Oregon land use. It's called the goalpost rule. And it's good. The goalpost sets when the permit is done so that no one can game the system and all of a sudden change the rules as it goes along. Except if you change the zoning, then the goalpost moves with the new zoning. You don't get to goalpost in for life. That would mean that my farm, since I had it since 1862, I guess I can go build a brothel on Highway 18 because prostitution was not regulated in 1862.
And it goes back to that date.
Right.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make sense. So we're fighting that. And that was why I was so, aggressive recently in the city.
Yes,
city
I
council.
love that.
Right.
Thank you for doing that.
Well, I was anxious to let them know that I'm not giving up.
Well, Ramsey, you fought the good fight, and we certainly hope that Waste Management will soon be out of the picture altogether. Thank you very much for
Thank you
being
very
on
much
today.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody, for watching today.